All right. I'll just go around the table. I want to start with the West Valley team, Kyle and team. Do you all have questions, thoughts you'd like to share?
Hey, thanks for starting with us. The W goes first.
It does.
Yeah, no questions at this time. Again, just it's one of those pieces, we're on the foundation, so we're learning lots and just having more conversations with our bargaining partners. And so just, yeah, it's foundational for us.
Great, thanks. And I'm just going through the Hollywood squares here. Dan from Mount Vernon, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. And Dr. Vivanco might be able to join us in a bit. He just had to come up. No real questions, just a lot of wondering about, sustainability. The Mount Vernon School District really did a thorough job of the looking at a modified or balanced calendar, and we've made some real progress in adjusting our schedule in some ways that made sense based on what we were looking at. But it was kind of the first couple steps down what I think is a longer journey. And so a lot of questions and wondering about what the longer journey looks like with less resources going towards it, but it's still a very important need and a potential great opportunity for us to rethink education in a way to better serve our kids. So that's kind of where our thoughts are.
Great, thank you. Claire, I don't know, Claire, if you're able to do audio, welcome from 9 Mile Falls.
Good afternoon. We also are very similar to West Valley as far as just being in the very beginning implementation, planning, just gathering information, doing a lot of listening here. And so no questions at this time.
All right. And I'm going to go to, I see a Mindy and a Joanne. I don't know if either of you have thoughts or questions. And I'll get to you, Bunker. We're going around the horn.
No, I appreciate that.
Hi, Joanne. Welcome.
Hi.
Where are you from?
Chimacum, which is out on the Olympic Peninsula. So we're past the beginning planning stages this year. We did implement a balanced calendar, so we're here until the very end of June. We're still looking at ways that we can improve and looking at how can we do intersessions better. So I think we still have some questions and clarifications, and I think that's one of the biggest ones for the teachers, which is I'm representing, I guess, the teachers. I don't see anybody else from my district here yet.
Great, thanks for sharing. And Mindy's phone, I don't know if you're able to do audio, but are you there, Mindy? And where are you from?
Yes, I'm from the Highland School District. And we are implementing some intercession weeks. And our big question just is, like, the balanced calendar grant going to come back out? Any other variations of that to help offset the cost of just trying to do something a little bit different?
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy. We're definitely in the middle of budget deliberation process right now. The system is certainly coalescing around some very large requests to stabilize school districts and personnel, special education, transportation, MSOCs, things like that. So we're definitely at that big item level, and we really haven't gotten down to like the smaller items. It's not unusual for us to go after several of those things. Balanced calendars in the contemplation. Going to do a little bit of listening around the state on priorities. We don't get to send everything to the Hill. And part of what we kind of struggle with, if I can use the word balance, is sometimes you send them a $400 million item to solve special ed, and then you send them 5 things that only cost $5 million each. And they say, well, we did 10 of your $5 million items. We did 10 of your 11 things. And they leave the $400 million item aside. So part of our challenge here is meeting with lawmakers to say, what would you be willing to do? And then in part, it's about partnerships. So if we have a really good coalition of folks who want to continue and they can carry some of that water, it doesn't count against, OSPI or the SEA here in that. So that's just some of the strategy that goes in. We're definitely thinking about it. Not committed to it yet. And if so, it would certainly be grant funds to continue the work that you all are doing through phases, because we haven't yet heard a legislator want to really fund a different kind of calendar, even for these early stage activities. So it wouldn't be like some change in the prototypical model for this at this point.
Bunker,
Thank
welcome.
you.
I know you had a
appreciate it.
question. Yeah.
Yes. I'm just want to thank Chris for having gone out even before he ran for office, talking about and questioning the traditional school calendar year's contribution, the deficit model of a traditional school calendar year, and it being a deficit model, and how else could it be used along with intervention to recover and to continue forward in a continuous connected model. And Chris, I hope that you will find a way, and I hope all districts, because of the stimulus this year, as they develop their calendar every single year, will now maybe be in a little more of a analytical mode in terms of the traditional calendar being learning support. And so I just want to thank you. And I'd just like to mention, I was on the reading by third grade webinar this morning, where the superintendent Sullivan Lane of Birmingham School District summarized by saying the greatest thing that they have done this year, seeing results, reporting to his board next Tuesday, is not a full year-round calendar. Everybody seems to have to kind of modify that terminology, but significantly different, and that the timely intervention is making a difference. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Good to see you.
And before we get into the content specific sessions, I did want to also invite we've got a couple of our ESD superintendents here and our hub leads, Jeanette and Sharon, Steve and Flip. So as you guys know, we have among the ESDs, this is something that all 9 ESDs are committed to supporting, but really we have 3 main ESDs that have really fostered the conditions, like set up the system for these webinars and the support system for you. And that's ESD 105, Kevin Chase's region, where Jeanette is housed out of, ESD 123 and in the Tri-Cities, and Capital Region ESD in Tumwater. So we sort of created quadrants of the state. And so I wanted to invite all of you, just if you have reflections or questions or things you just like to get out before we start digging into the additional content while we have Chris, if you have thoughts you'd like to share or context from your regions.
I'll go and just say a quick thing. I just want to thank this team for the work that you've done, and how education systems are hard to change. And I just appreciate the leadership from OSPI to provide resources to help get some of this change happening and laying the groundwork for future change, and other OSPI staff and all those that put the hard work into this, and David for his leadership. We aren't all there yet, and we have several districts that are still struggling and working through this, but none of this would have happened without that support. And any way we can find more support to get it done would be greatly appreciated. But just want to express my thanks from myself and for the region.
Yeah, I would echo what Steve has said. Coming in new this year as an ESD superintendent, I've learned a lot. I've tried to attend as many of these gatherings as possible, and I know we have a few districts that have taken advantage of the opportunity to shift to a balanced calendar. Obviously, so much going on, and all of our communities are trying to figure out ways that they can support learning in the best way possible. And sometimes that's reconfiguring the calendar. Other times, I was just on a webinar about the possible loss of timberland trust money. So as we go into this next legislative session, looking for resources to do things, I just appreciate the alternative ways in which people are trying to support their community students and families the best way possible. So thanks for having all this work and inviting me to it midway through the process.
Chris, Sharon Bauer, I
Well, on
have a
behalf of,
question. Oh, sorry, Jeanette. Go ahead.
I was just going to say on behalf of 105, Kevin's not here, and our new ESD superintendent, Shane Bowen, is we've been really devoted to this work of balanced calendar. And if there's anything any of the districts need help with or have questions about, feel free to contact me and I can try to get your questions answered. And again, 105 is really committed to this work.
Okay, my question, Chris, is we keep hearing about trying to help legislators understand the impact and possibilities of balanced calendar. And one of the things that we'd like to do is come up with some talking points that districts could use when they meet with their legislators as the session is ended and before the next session starts. Could you give us a few pointers on what you think talking points would be helpful for legislators to hear around balanced calendar?
Well, definitely, I'd say you got to start with some myth busting. I think a lot of their responses, well, if it's 180 days and 1,027 instructional hours, it kind of doesn't matter where you put it. It's all cost the same. And so there's a cost reality that you all know about here. And part of the reason is because you're intentional about that. You have the chance for intersections and additional supports and things like that. So I'd say do a little myth busting with them. I mean, you certainly don't want to suggest that it, is a dollar for dollar sort of expansion of cost, but being kind of honest with them about that. And then there is some really good research, of course, that David and team brings. And so letting them know about that possibility. And then, they tend to be pretty incremental these days. They want to try a lot of things and not jump on anything because there has been some past downside risk of that. They took years to go from the 4-day school week for a handful of districts to expanding that. And so maybe just talking to them a little bit about, let us continue to experiment. We'll bring you the data. What do you need to see? So I would ask them, what do you need to see to show that this is getting the kind of impacts we want? Better rest along the way, great intercession supports for kids, less learning loss or summer melt. If there are things you could commit to in the data, I do believe there are some legislators who'd like to keep going. They just want to know that there's something at the end they can tell their colleagues if it worked or not.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I think that's a great segue. Chris, I'm not sure if you're able to stay with us for the rest, but appreciate the time you took and thanks for joining us. Thanks for your leadership and your commitment to this work. And we will make sure you remain in the loop as districts are exploring and implementing.
Thanks, everybody.
So
Good to
thank
see
you.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to just all of you should have received an agenda, but if you didn't, we'll just quickly give you a quick look at our 3 sessions. So John is here with us. Thank you, John, for joining us as well from OSPI. You've been the heartbeat of getting this launched a couple of years ago and certainly carrying forward through all of the transitions we've had. So we'll ask John will share some information, have a deeper dialogue. Jason and Amy from OSPI's fiscal team and Title I team will be joining, are here, and they will be doing their workshop. Some of you might have seen Jason at one of our in-person summits a couple years ago, but he'll build on what he shared there. And then Jim and David, of course, with a deeper dive into intercessions. So with that, I will welcome John. And John, you want me to show your slide now?
Can you hold off for just a second?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's just great being here. Year 3 of this. It just seems like it was yesterday when we got this thing started, but I was thinking about how it just happened. And the nice thing about Washington State is when we're talking about student success, all the partner groups come together, the districts come together. This was kind of untried work, and things really got together for us the first couple of years with the funding and all of that. So I recall us talking at the beginning of this school year, right about the time the funding was no longer available. And we were saying, what should we do? And this is a testament to all the partners and the districts that we just continued the work. We just continued the work and kept going on. And really, it sounds like we have more districts coming on board. So that's awesome to hear that. As far as the initiative moving forward, Chris did a really good job of talking about what could come next. So those talking points with their legislators, trying to get those things out there. I think really talking about the successes in the myth busting on that end. I do have a slide if you want to show that, Jessica, on the legislative update. And I want to thank Jason and Amy for coming on and talking about braiding and coordinating those funds, because that's a big one. That's a way for you to repurpose your title, your federal funds and your state funds to help support. So this is the bill that Chris was talking about, is the substitute House Bill 2381 about the efficiency and economy and efficiency flexibility for the school calendars. This is essentially for this 4-day school week. So it raised the number from 10 to 30, and then student populations from 500 to 1,000, and then it struck some of the language afterwards. So if you want to look at a great example of what's going on in a 4-day school week, talk to Joe West in Patterson. Been talking with him the last couple of years, man. He's just embraced this model. A lot of great stuff. Patterson, right on the Columbia River there in the eastern part of the state. Hard place to recruit folks because you're competing against everybody, but I think he's doing a good job out there. So if you get a chance, please connect with him. So before I turn it back over to Jessica, have her folks come on again, my sincere thanks. This has been great work. It's awesome to see this going on. Please connect with me if you have any questions. Our intent is to have this group continue as we're moving through, as long as we have interest. And really thank David and Jim for their national support on this. So thanks, everyone, and I'll pass it back.
I can't find my mute. Sorry about that. Okay, before we move on, questions or any comments for John? All right, I'm going to stop sharing and go ahead.
Something I've always wondered about as a policymaker, but educator and advocate, and that might be in your shop, John, and that is, in terms of intercession and intervention and opportunity, why do the local conversations about calendar change end up coming to more money when there should be money already allocated from whatever title dollars are coming in, whatever percentage of local levies are used? I haven't heard a lot of conversation around taking a hard look at what we're already doing in terms of summer school and after school and Saturday school, and if it's getting us what we want, and if that analysis is reflective of possibly not, along with the why not make some adjustments in the calendar, how do we encourage transition to the conversation? Well, let's just take a look at our calendar and look at the resources we have. Am I all wet in that urgency?
That's a great question. And today is and it has been happening in smattered areas, but today's a good opportunity to focus on it with the Amy and the Jason presentation, and for you all to get this information out. I've been a school superintendent, and it always comes up, it's not allowable, it's not allowable. And then we say, okay, we just take that as face value that it's not allowable. Essentially, and David and Jim can help me with this, is that when we do this 180 and balance the calendar, the summer school part of it goes away, and you can repurpose those funds, because summer school is actually happening during the school year, during the intersessions. But we assume a lot without going in and going deep dive into explaining that. And you have to say that a lot of times, because we're used to the traditional school year being 180 days. And then you have the summer off. So we're in year 3 of this initiative. And even though it's been said, we still need to keep doing that education piece too. So Amy and Jason are going to do a great job today. They always do. I've seen this presentation. They're going to do a great job, but it's up to you all to get this information out word of mouth. Word of mouth, get it out. And yeah, for sure, we're willing, and it's that adaptive change. It's that adaptive change that we're looking at here. Good question. Thanks for asking that.
Great. Thanks, John. All right, Jason, over to you.
Thank you. I feel no pressure now to solve everyone's problems, but so I'll share my screen. Is that how we're going? Okay, let me get that situated and oops. One second, please. If you looks like I don't have the permission to share.
Oh no, that it's like the Gremlins.
Maybe just make him a co-host, he can
Yes.
hear, yeah,
Do I have that power? Who has that power?
you do. I think Shayna does too.
I don't. Sheena, can you make Jason a co-host, please?
And there's something that just came up on my thing that said Amy Harris was the co-host as well, so I
He
just.
is that. Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I have more power. than
Jim,
that.
I think you're the host.
I can share now.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to share this version here. You can all see that okay? Okay. So whoop, I am I think several of you know me, executive director over elementary early learning and federal programs. I've primarily worked with Title I Part A and been at OSPI for about 7 years. Amy, you want to introduce yourself real quick and then we'll move on?
Well, first I have to find the mute or unmute button. Must be just late in the day and the way things are going. Hi everyone, Amy Harris. I'm the Director of Federal Fiscal Policy and Grants Management at OSPI. I've been at OSPI about 6 years. I'll be talking about time and effort today and how that relates to braiding and blending. Some of you might know time and effort already, some of you may not. So hopefully can give you some pointers. I'll be doing like a high level time and effort presentation, but yeah, happy to help today and see you all.
Great, thank you, Amy. And it's not part of the presentation, but I will add that Amy is also the OSPI liaison with the auditors, the state auditors. And she and I have had numerous conversations with the state auditors when they have questions about expenses in Title I funds or federal funds here. So we are always happy to help you if you have questions with an auditor. And I think what we've prepared here can help you to feel more comfortable when an auditor is when you're being audited by the state auditors. I want to start by framing the process here, and then we'll go into deep dive into blending, which I think we want to spend most of our time, and then a little bit on braiding funds. So the first thing is planning at the end of or the middle of your school year, planning for next year. You're doing that comprehensive needs assessment to figure out where are the needs and what are the resources. And you are using that information to design that plan to fulfill those needs. But as you're doing that, keep in mind that I think it's been said indirectly or directly so far today that all of your intercession activities are supplemental activities. In addition to your after school program or your extended learning activities, all of that is equivalent to your supplemental activities. So all of the federal title funds are designed, their purpose is to support those students with those supplemental activities. So much of what we talk about today, there's a lot of overlap with any of the title programs to support your intercession activities. But as you are thinking about your resources, your federal funds and some of your state funds that are designed to be those supplemental funding sources, think about the two different general ways that you can use those funds together. The first way is braiding. Braiding the funds is really just coordinating the funds. You're probably already doing that. Coordinating the funds, find out what different funding sources can pay for this activity, and who can pay for what piece, and you coordinate that funding there. So it's kind of like in my little image there I have, it's like a, we'll say a jazz band. It's like a jazz band. Each instrument has their own music, but together they make a really nice song. So blending though is different. Blending, you're combining funds from multiple buckets of funding into one pool of funds. The funds no longer are those separate funding buckets, but they're blended, as I've got that blender there. They're blended into a new source of funding, or as one source of funding. And so we'll talk mostly about blending here, but we'll talk a little about braiding after that. And feel free to, I think we'll have time for questions afterwards, but we'll get there. So as we're thinking about the blending piece, we have two ways that I think that do apply to everybody here, that are the most flexible ways to blend funds. And that we're talking about maximizing the funding flexibility, because there's not new funding to help your the balanced calendar activities. We got to find a way to maximize the flexibilities of what we currently have. So first I'll talk about transferring funds. Transferring funds, you can transfer your Title II funds and your Title IV Part A funds. When you transfer those, you can transfer them into multiple different title funding sources that you currently are eligible for. When you transfer them into a different funding source, they become those other funding sources. So for example, when you transfer them to Title I, they become Title I funds. They take on all the rules and all the flexibilities for Title I Part A. The benefits to doing this, it increases the ability of the district to it increases the dollar amount for the district to fund those district priorities. It also reduces the paperwork. So for example, if you're applying to you're transferring Title IV and Title II into Title I, you just have to do the Title I application forms and progress reports. It reduces all of those pieces. The budget revisions, just your Title I budget revisions. And in general, Title I Part A is the most flexible funding source. For Title I Part A, you can use those funds to support any supplemental activity for a well-rounded education. So that depending on the needs in your district, in your schools, you could use those funds for ELA or math, science, social studies. We've had examples of districts having a creative music program. So a lot of flexibility on how those funds can be spent in Title I. The one warning that I'll give you though is Title II and Title IV Part A, they have 100% carryover. Title I Part A has a limit of 15%, except once every 3 years. So if you are concerned about not spending all of your funds, you may want to think carefully about transferring those into Title I. You could also, another option that doesn't save you the paperwork, but could save you with fiscally, if you want to wait till later in the year, you can transfer those funds later in the year after you know you need those funds in your title program, for example. And then the next piece here is, so transferring funds, that's at the district level. You're transferring everything into your district funding sources there. When you are consolidating funds, this is a school level flexibility. I encourage you to really consider transferring funds, but I also encourage you to consider going into a school-wide. Every district in this, every school that receives Title I funds can be school-wide. If the school is less than 35, less than 40% poverty in that school, that you'll have to apply for a waiver. But as long as the school is eligible for Title I funds, you can design it so it'll be a school. It can be a school-wide. The benefits of consolidating funds in a school-wide, what it does is it takes multiple funding sources and combines them into one pot or one pool of funds. And this is for just about all of the title funds, the federal title funds, and some of the state supplemental funds like learning assistance program funding. Putting all of those into one pool of money allows you more flexibility on where you put that money. When you consolidate all those funds, you have to ensure that the intent and purpose of that funding source is met, but it doesn't matter how it's funded. So I could move my Title II funds into the consolidated school-wide plan, and I do not have to align the Title II funds to Title II allowable activities, but instead just ensure, for example, we're doing PD for our teachers. It doesn't matter what funding source we use for that, but those Title II funds are in there, and you can use those for what's needed. I have an example here on the next page that's, example is a strong word, but we'll get there in a second. The key here is that all of these funding sources, they now become school-wide funds. Even the Title I funds, they're no longer Title I funds, they're now school-wide funds. And they're all used to fund the activities and needs as described in the school-wide plan. And then we encourage you, as you are doing this, to make sure you have a way to, in your internal tracking documents, to identify which funding sources and which activities, which funds go to support those school-wide activities. So an auditor is not going to question the allowability of a specific expense if it's part of the school-wide funds and supports that school-wide plan. They may question it if you're buying alcohol or gambling with it. But if it's allowable in the school-wide plan, then they wouldn't question those individual expenses there. So having that internal document, that internal tracking system to identify what's part of the school-wide, that's going to help you in case an auditor looks at your expenses there. So let me give you an example here. We've got one school. This is at the school level again. And in this example, we see their, if they were not consolidating funds, they have their Title I funds, about 79,000 goes to some Title I interventions. Then we've got school improvement funds, 26,000 goes into professional development for, and then we've got learning assistance program funds in that one building, just goes for those LAP interventions. And then a big bucket of basic ed funds. So one difficulty here is you're trying to align your activities to the bucket of money you have for those activities. And if you consolidate all those funds, it now becomes one big bucket of school-wide funds. For now for your school-wide funds, rather than trying to align the specific activities to the specific funding source and the specific bucket of money. You can now set up your, decide what your activities are, what your needs are, and then put the money in there to support that need. So a little more flexibility there. It also allows for more flexibility on what is allowable, as you don't have to worry about LAP can only pay for this, school improvement can only pay for that. You now can use all those funds for whatever activity is needed. Again, as long as the intent and purpose is met there. I feel like I'm going through this really quickly, but these are the funding sources that you can consolidate into your school-wide pool of funds. A couple caveats there with the Title I Part C and the 2 buckets of special ed money. Those we would be really careful and cautious about consolidating those funds. It is allowable, but we'd recommend that you talk with those program folks before you do that. And then we do have some funding sources, some state funding sources that cannot be consolidated. These, while you can you can still perform these activities in a school-wide building, but you have to keep them outside of the school-wide funding. And so those are the 4 main ones listed there. And I will jump to my last slide talking about braiding funds. So what I have here is really a resource. Most of you have probably seen this before, and I've used this primarily for previous presentations here. The unlocking document here is a large document. Most of that document covers braiding. It covers the coordinating of federal funds. So if you are looking for a way to braid some literacy interventions, one place you can go here is on page 47, and you can see what we've got here, where we list specific kinds of activities related to literacy interventions and which funding sources can pay for those activities to help you braid those activities. Got the same thing if you look on page 23, you can see teacher-student intersession materials. So that would just be supplemental resource materials for intervention activities. On page 36, professional development for behavior or academic interventions. You can find examples of what funding sources can help pay for that on page 36. There may be other pages that will be helpful for each of these topics, but these are just 3 examples of how you could use this unlocking document to help you as you're planning what activities and funding sources will be used for what. So I've said a lot. I know Amy has some pieces here. Jessica, should we open it now for some questions here or wait until after Amy?
I think we're a small enough group. We could do some questions now if you want.
Sure. Amy, does that work out for you?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to first ask if our school district folks, I see West Valley had to jump off. Partners from school districts, do you have questions or reflections, more information you'd like from Jason?
I guess it's Ismail Vivanco here with Mount Vernon Schools. On the Title I Part C, that's the migrant. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
And so, the whole supplement supplant, traditionally it's been like the cherry on top kind of analogy. And when you ask about how you check with the programs, is that like the people running the program within the district or at the state office?
At the state office.
Gotcha. Yeah. So just coordinate with them.
Yeah, and the supplement not supplant piece is one that is a little tricky for some of the programs. But we're hoping to build better internal knowledge and understanding on how that piece works within OSPI, so we can better help explain it to all the district folks out there. So.
All right. Let's head on over to Amy.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to minimize so I don't see myself talking. So hello everyone again. I'm here to talk about time and effort and how that relates to blending and braiding. For those of you who don't know what time and effort is, it's a federal grant requirement. So any employee that charges all or part of their salary to a federal program, in general, time and effort is required. There are, of course, some exceptions to the rule. I don't have time to go over all of those today. If you have more questions about time and effort in general, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help by email, jumping on a Zoom call with you, etc. So, like I mentioned, time and effort should be prepared by all certificated and classified staff that have salaries and benefits charged directly to a federal award, directly to multiple federal awards, or directly to any combination of a federal award and other federal, state, or local fund sources. Next slide, please. So this slide talks about how time and effort should be handled when consolidating funds. So like Jason mentioned, in a school-wide program. One great thing about if you're consolidating funds is you can use a semi-annual certification instead of a monthly time and effort. And what that would look like is the supervisor can group all of the employees that work in a school-wide building on activities in a school-wide plan, group those together on one certification that the supervisor dates and signs. You know, it includes all the employees' names on there. Please add the building name so we can identify it as a school-wide building. And when I say we, I mean program reviewers who do subrecipient monitoring or the state auditor's office, because they're going to want to look at your school-wide plan. They're going to compare that to your group semi-annual certification, make sure those employees are working on activities in the school-wide plan. One important thing is that if you have staff that work in part on activities and also revenue sources in a school-wide plan, and if you have staff that work part-time on activities outside the school-wide plan, then they have to do a monthly time and effort. So for example, if you have an employee that works on LAP and Title I and state special ed, they have to do a monthly time and effort because, as Jason mentioned earlier, state special ed cannot be combined into a school-wide plan. So those employees would have to do a monthly time and effort. Next slide, please. So if you're braiding funds, those employees must prepare a monthly time and effort. We also call them monthly PARs, which PAR stands for Personnel Activity Report. And the monthly time and effort, the bullet points here list out the information that must be included on the monthly PAR at a minimum. So it has to include the activities or the programs, cost objectives, etc., that the employees work on for a specified period of time. So for that month, they need to include all the cost objectives, including federal and non-federal. They need to be signed and dated by the employee. We also encourage a supervisor to sign that as well. They need to be completed timely and monthly after the work has been completed. And when we say timely, we mean by the end of the following month. So if the monthly time and effort is for January, we expect to see that it is signed by the end of February. It also, again, it needs to include all of the cost objectives or programs that the employee is working on, and its actual time. So time and effort is what they actually work on. It's not based on budget, it's actual work hours. And again, it needs to include federal and non-federal activities. Next slide, please. Here are some common issues that we typically find during our program reviews, formerly called CPR. And this is other things, also things that the auditors look for as well when looking at time and effort. So I'll just highlight some of these for you. So the time and effort needs to be actual time spent working on the programs, like I mentioned. It can't be based on budget. So you can base salaries on budget at the beginning of a school year, but the actual time and effort needs to be the actual time worked, and you need to reconcile that at least quarterly and make adjustments if the differences are greater than 10%. If the differences are less than 10%, then you can make those adjustments annually. Some other things that we see: no dates by the signature, it's not signed or dated timely, it's completed prior to the work being completed, it doesn't include all of the programs the employee works on, it doesn't include the time period worked, incorrect type of certification, so they use a semi-annual instead of monthly, or no time and effort at all. And then we do have 2 different substitute time and effort plans. One is a fixed schedule and one is sampling. And I won't get into that today, but if you need more information on a substitute time and effort plan, please let me know. I'd be happy to help with that. And then down below, we have a link to our time and effort bulletin, which also includes examples of time and effort that you can use. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, reach out. I'd be happy to help you through Zoom or phone call if you have any questions on time and effort. And I think that's all for me. So I'd be happy to take any questions about time and effort.
I think it's perhaps everyone's favorite topic.
Yes. And
bless you for going into the weeds. Thank
yes,
you.
You're welcome. And I will say, just as a heads up for you, we are working on a new time and effort bulletin. The one we have out is from 2017. So it's quite old. I mean, it still has relevant information, but we're going to be updating that. We're also going to be adding new flexibilities for time and effort. As some of you might know, OSPI uses the old time and effort guidance. And we did that for a few reasons that I won't get into right now, but we're going to allow for 2 options. One is districts can still use the current time and effort rules that I just talked about that are in the current bulletin, or you can adopt the new, more flexible guidelines that the Uniform Grant Guidance has had in place for several years. However, it sounds great, right? More flexibility, but I will caution you that with more flexibility from the feds comes less guidance. So more information to come on that. We're hoping to have a new bulletin out in June that explains this a little bit more. And if you want more information, feel free to reach out to me. But just a heads up that that's coming. So more time and effort fun.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Jason. And I did put, so all the materials for today are in the participant folder. I think you all have a link. I put a link to the Unlocking Federal and State Funds document that was updated this past January. That's in the chat as well, also in the materials folder. Any other fiscal questions before we move on to our last session for today?
Jessica, this is really quick. I've always wanted to ask this at a very high level, and I don't think I could ever get to a higher level than Jason. And that is students who qualify for supplementary funding. And in my presentations, I include the whole supplemental WAC and those pieces and the required to attend, may be living in circumstances that would qualify them for and working very hard in school and achieving in school, but would qualify for some enrichment activities. And it's very hard to see for me to peer in and know in the funding streams that you're talking about, can any of that funding be used for what's the term? I just used it, the enrichment.
Sure, I'll take this, Amy. So first I'll say that Title I Part A funds can be used for both the students who are struggling to succeed and this because you know they're lacking skills or need additional supports. You can also use Title I funds for students who need enrichment. Because the law, the ESSA law has this new well-rounded allowability for Title I Part A, it can be used for any of that. I will say that also Title IV Part A allows for a portion of that to be used for enrichment activities. And then the other thing that I'll say is in a Title I school-wide program, you don't have to identify students who need supplemental supports. You can provide supports to any student in the school during that intersession period or outside of it.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I think our last program component is handing it over to David and Jim to do a deeper dive on intersession scenarios.
Okay, we are ready to roll. First of all, I would just want to say this is exactly what we needed as an end cap to our series here. Starting with Superintendent Chris Reichdahl, who is his unwavering commitment to this is really, really impressive. Jason and Amy, you're saying there's a pathway. One of the things we continue to battle with this idea is that everyone has a lived experience. And most of us went to school on the traditional calendar. And so by default, we think we're educational experts. Now, everyone on this call is an educational expert. You work in education, but we are often faced with other people who are outside of our industry who think they're experts because they went to school. And then finally, the barriers that seem to find their way into the conversation happens to be, well, how do you fund something? And what I just heard is there is a pathway to use your funds appropriately, and you can pull this off. Thank you so much. I am much smarter right now than I was even 45 minutes ago. So thank you. Jim and I are going to bring you to the finish line here, folks. We're going to be talking about building a balanced calendar. You all know about that, but it's helpful to go back through. We're going to get into some of the current research and what's happening across the nation, and then we'll end with a little bit of Q&A. So here we go. Why would a district want to go into considering a balanced calendar, even that conversation? Well, on the heels of a pandemic, it's to address unfinished learning. The primary reason is to push back the summer slide, also known as brain drain or summer learning loss. In a time where we want to access our students more frequently, we all talk a good game when we send them home for 12 or 13 weeks and we say we're going to drive meals into neighborhoods, but you're still missing kids. The number one way to access the kids is to have them in our system. This particular model affords us to have healthier schools because we're deep cleaning more frequently. We have improved teacher morale, which has a positive impact on teacher burnout. and our educators tend to take their annual dentist appointments and doctor's appointments during a scheduled school break. Here are just some of the whys, but I want you to start locking into a few of those as you navigate this particular conversation. The why continued. Okay, the amount of learning loss continues to grow annually. If you don't want to believe David Hornick or James Peterson or anyone else who's been working on this for a number of years, look up John Hattie. He and his operation, they study studies, and they have determined through a series of meta-analyses that summer has a negative impact on all kids. 2/3 of the achievement gap in 9th grade can be attributed to the amount of required time it takes a teacher to reteach and review what is learned prior to summer intermission. In other words, our teachers are reteaching between 20 and 40 days every fall. So you have 180 days to teach a year's worth of curriculum, which is less than half of the available days, and then you're unplugging another 40 of those. It's a broken system. All children attending school on the traditional calendar lose an average of 2.6 months of math. And we are being asked to remediate the learning gaps that the traditional calendar creates. School districts across the nation are spending millions of at-risk and title funds to help close the learning gaps that we are contributing to. As Phyllis mentioned earlier, we are continuing, the number one calendar across the nation continues to be built on a deficit model. So I have been trying to share the 150, 180, 220 concept. You all have kids in your district that only need 150 school days, but by law, you owe them 180. You have to make sure they're in school 180 days. There's a number of kids that need 180 days, and that's exactly what they get. And there's a growing number of students that need 220 days, but we only give them 180. Now, I think I have heard across this journey of the last 3 to 4 years that 1 day of school in the state of Washington costs like $30 million. It's a big number. So adding school days isn't ideal. But as you just heard, if you use your funding in a more creative way, very appropriate, and I'm not asking you to do anything unethical. I'm just wanting you to imagine the possibility of using your funds differently. Some of your kids can actually attend school 220 or more days on a 180 school day calendar by using what we call intersession. An intersession, by definition, is the time between two scheduled periods of academics or during a scheduled break. On an international level, I'm not asking you to add school days, but I am telling you that if you were to add intersession into your calendar, reduce summer down to 6 to 8 weeks, and plug in a few more breaks, you could, for certain students, find 215 to 225 school days, which would put those students near the top of the number of days of school a student attends. Again, I am not advocating you add additional days to your calendar year. I'm advocating that you use your 180 days more efficiently across the calendar year. Doing that several years in a row will create tremendous results. You can then use your funding differently because you won't be necessarily remediating, you'll be enriching at that time. I need you to consider a few things. Determine the needs of your environment. Work with the community to make sure that no student will be left without intersession opportunities, childcare, or summer activities as you're navigating this conversation. Work with your educational partners. You have several ESDs on the call right now. You have several different educational professional organizations on the call right now. The state superintendent joined us tonight. Are you kidding me? That is incredible. Make sure everyone knows what you're doing. And then communicate often. Schools may need to offer professional development opportunities and community meetings over and over and over to make sure that everyone knows what's going on. Here's an example it's a crosswalk between a balanced calendar and a traditional calendar. Balanced calendar starts early August, traditional calendar starts mid-August. There's some time off around, this is like professional development time, some time off around Labor Day, 2-week fall break on the balanced calendar, 1-week fall break on the traditional calendar. Full week off at Thanksgiving. We have just 3 days off at Thanksgiving here. This is common. Looks like MLK Day is common. This is a week and a day. This is just a week. There's a 2-week spring break on the balanced calendar, a 1-week spring break for the traditional calendar, a full week off at Memorial break, just a day off at Memorial, ending late June, ending mid-June. Okay, that's a model calendar. It doesn't mean that's the only model. Again, you've heard me say, think about starting with a 5-year look back at your attendance rates for your students and your staff. Determine your non-negotiables. So here's the punchline. What is intercession? Intercession generally refers to the period between academic sessions or terms, typically occurring during a school break, winter break, or summer intermission. The structure and themes are locally controlled by each school district. Schools offering intercession programs during vacation periods often credit intercession with enhancing and supplementing regular curriculum. Intercession courses provide opportunities for teachers to experiment. So when you're finding and you're bumping into educators who are feeling like they need a change, encourage them to teach intercession. There's more flexibility. They might even teach a different age group of kids. And before you know it, that's that booster shot of energy. Another advantage is that there's a lot less review time necessary because you're either pre-teaching, reteaching, or enriching kids. And this model is especially helpful for low socioeconomic status students or high risk students. However, the newest research is saying the balanced calendar is good for all kids. What does it look like? Could be multi-age classroom, thematic-based instruction, cooperative learning, experimental learning which includes field trips, operates on the school schedule, transportation and food are generally provided, and you hire your own staff for additional wages. How do school districts pay for intercession? We can cruise on past that one. We just had a great session on that. Thanks again, Jason and Amy. Jim, I'm handing it off to you.
Okay, thank you. And ditto to what David said. Now that you heard the state superintendent speak, giving you the big overview, having John Mishra speak, who is also just super talented, and having Jason speak about how the funding is going on, then David about what intercessions are. Now I'll just give you some examples of intercession. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll start off with the elementary schools. If you don't mind hitting that, David, hit the next one. So the Twin Rivers Unified School District, located in McClellan Park, California. Its website notes it's continuously collaborating with various community partners to offer school intercession camps and childcare options at no current cost to students in grades K-8. So this is there are some that are actually at cost. So this is just to get the ideas and the juices kind of flowing. The first intercession about bugs and botanicals reads, "We're creeping it real during spring break as we explore all things bugs and botanicals." So that's on the left there, and our presentation will have all of the references so that you could actually visit them. The next one is about, I'm sorry, this district also has other sessions in addition to the spring camp there, environmental science, like Junkyard Wars baseball camps, and then Discovery Break Camp. We go to the next one. The next one is the Norwood school district located in Bethesda, Maryland. It's a co-educational independent school with approximately 450 students in a pre-K through 8th grade. And it sits on 40 sprawling acres in Bethesda. It was founded in 1952 and develops students from PK to 8 programs to make them confident lifelong learners who have academic character and leadership skills to succeed in high school and beyond. And their intercessions are 4 days and range from open heart surgery to cake decorating. I don't think they're from the same teacher, but maybe, who knows? Everybody could have different talents. The next slide is the Aiken County Public Schools. Sharon got a good kick out of that one. Located in Aiken, South Carolina. In addition to offering students identified for intensive support during intercession, a limited number of spots are also available in pilot programs offered during intercession for academic acceleration, including a coding camp, as well as a fine arts opportunity. Now, coding camp is held in the elementary school and allows students to explore coding and programming through various platforms such as drones and 3D printing, robots, and I don't know what Makey is, but in real world simulations. The Fine Arts Camp is being facilitated through their partnership with another school of arts and will feature photography, STEM art, and design and music. Fine Arts Camp is also being held in the elementary. The next one is in beautiful Hawaii. So if anyone wants to go take a look at this one, I'd be more than happy to go with you, I guess. I'm going to say it's Kama'aina Kids. And it's a private and nonprofit multi-service organization dedicated to serving children and their families through quality childcare programs. When school is out of session, the K-6 grade kids can enjoy seasonal programs full of fun and enrichment. The specialty camps options are offered in partnership with Wet and Wild. These are some local amusement parks, Sea Life Park, and the Bishop Museum, and others. Each day camp program offers themed activities in Kama'aina, kid sites plus outdoor enrichment activities. So this is also in addition to the Honolulu Zoo. So this was interesting because it's also forging partnerships with local establishments and partnering with them. If you could go to the next one, David. So the Bitney Prep Charter School, and here is just an example of their, this is in Grass Valley, California, believes that every student is a unique individual and is capable of spectacular things. I love that. And they believe in such stuff as one student at a time, real world learning, small supportive environment, and big picture learning. So they introduced in 2013 intercessions. So this has been going on for more than 10 years. And some of their intercessions include mountain biking, anatomy and physiology, modern Middle East, animation, poetry workshop, video production, cooking, and photography. Moving along to more of the district level stuff. We're looking at the Hopewell City Public Schools, and that's in Hopewell, Virginia, which provides programs for approximately 4,000 students. So some of the intercessions that they are doing, one is called Digging Our Roots, and that's where students learn about African-American history and how trucks and tractors assist farmers in Virginia. Summer Snapshot, exploring photography for young shutterbugs, igniting the creativity of photographers in grades 3 to 5. On their students learn photography through a new lens. Reading Chocolate Fever. Students will read Chocolate Fever, visit a local chocolate factory, create chocolates, and have chocolate fever. Once again, I love this because you're also relying on local establishments and really forging those partnerships, which may be not exist in existence now, or maybe it's not as strong, and this could really strengthen those bonds. A couple of others that has Science Over Other Adventures with Anderson, and they explore Hopewell watering holes to include Crystal Lake and some of the other local watering areas. And the History Writing Language Arts. And this is the HBCU experience, teaching students the importance and relevance of historically Black colleges and universities. So really some real cool cultural events. Moving ahead to the next one for the Gloucester County Public Schools, and that's in Gloucester, Virginia. Here, the intercessions are optional, and there are 6 intercession weeks per school year, and designed to appeal to student choice and interest, and they're intended to foster strong relationships and engagement. They're full day with transportation and meals provided, and they're with small groups. And last thing they say is that the intercessions are required to be fun. I think that's on the next slide. So that's important to them. And this is for an entire school district. Moving ahead to another example for some more resources is on the first one is the Garland Independent School District. And this is a district intercession handbook. This is pretty dense and it comes with a lot of good information. So please check it out. And it serves the communities of Garland, Rolette, and Sasha, and ranks as the second largest district in Dallas County, Texas. So the handbook includes helpful information regarding planning, staffing, and developing intercessions. It also includes a plan for students who attend the intercessions and those who don't attend the intercessions. They have programs like Language and Literacy, iStation, Lexia, Power Up, Achieve 3000, and a host of other things, even Khan Academy that they use for students who are who don't want to follow the regular intercession. But there's a whole, it has everything on what you need to do to start an intercession. The next one is the North Carolina General Assembly report, and it's on implementation and outcomes from school extension, learning, recovery, and enrichment programs in the state of North Carolina. Of course, that all the data shows that the extra, especially the summer learning, has been beneficial, and it has reflections on the lessons learned from what happened through the entire state of North Carolina. The next one, and I'm coming to an end here, a review of the students' use of American Rescue Funding Plan funding to support after-school and summer opportunities. So this is a report from the federal government that looked at what was being done, and you could see state by state who was doing stuff for the summer, what were they doing to reduce the COVID learning loss as well as the summer learning loss. And it has some really interesting lessons learned there as well. And then lastly, it's this one, even though it's not as timely as it was a couple of years ago, but still post-COVID strategies for summer learning. And I'll just glean a couple of things from the research. 4 weeks is the most common length for summer programs, with at least 31 of the 100 largest districts setting their programs for that length. Many of the programs go beyond traditional academic-oriented stuff and into enrichment activities, arts, and social emotional support for students. And while some of the larger districts open their summer programs to all students, many concentrate on traditional summer school populations. And some districts are supporting additional learning time in other ways, including investing their money in extended year programs that we're talking here, as well as after-school programs. Now, I understand that some of these things are now gone with the recent sunsetting of some of those funds, but it still can spark some maybe some motivation or some inspiration for what you can do in your particular school districts. And David, that's from my little piece.
Right on. Well, although Jim just ended his section, I'm going to throw it back to him and just or give him a shout out. In Jim's book, Summer versus School, The Possibilities of the Year-Round School, I urge you to look up chapter 15. That has some good detail about intercession. And if you want more information, you could either reach out to me or especially Jim on that. Also, we have authors Hasser and Nasser, who wrote Year-Round Education, Change and Choice for Schools and Teachers. They have a whole chapter on transition to the balanced calendar case studies, as well as intercession examples. I mean, tons of intercession examples. I'd also like to share that there is a new book coming out. It's Summer versus School, and it's really going to be focusing on the work that's been happening in the state of Washington, which will also include intercession. And then finally, you have heard me say in the past, if you're looking for more of the why, these are infographics. They can be found on Pinterest. I'm not exactly sure how I got them there, but there's about 100 of them there. I'm not a proficient Pinterest user, but check it out. Once you live it, you love it, folks. We are here for you. It's been a pleasure working with you again this particular school year. If you need anything, reach out. Jim and I will be here. Jessica, back to you.
Great. Thank you both. And you have been amazing friends and partners in this journey for many years. And so really appreciate your session today, your help throughout the journey. And I think everyone here has your contact information. But it is included in the materials for today's session. So it's in the slide deck, everybody. We are just about at time, but I did want to invite any of our lead partners. John, would you like to say a few words before we close out? Reflections or any others?
Just continue to be energized by this work. It's just awesome to see it continue and continue and continue. And working with David and Jim on this, they have the whole nation and international perspective. They keep saying Washington is doing incredible work, and we are. Because again, like I said, when I spoke earlier, when it comes to serving students, we just take care of business here. So thanks everybody for joining in today.
Thank you. And I did put a link in the chat. I'll be sending a follow-up to all of you after this, this afternoon, to also access the materials and the survey, the link to the survey. That's really important because we're in the process of mapping out what kinds of ways that the ESD system can continue to support districts that are on the journey. We obviously have limited resources, as do all of you. And so we want to think about the most cost-effective ways that we can continue trying to support districts that are exploring this and keeping all of you connected. So stay tuned for that, but sharing your feedback will help us with our planning. With that, I think just a big thank you and see you in the future. Take care. Thanks for your leadership.